Okay.
Sandy says read, and welcome to the channel. You guys, I am excited to do our first live stream interview. I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping things and then interview the awesome guest that you see on your screen. You guys can leave some comments in the chat box beside the screen here. I will forget that it's there. So every once in a while, I'll look over at the screen and look at the chat box. Hopefully, I won't ignore everyone in the chat. Put in some questions as you think of them, and hopefully I will notice them. You guys, tonight we're going to talk about fantasy literature, the importance of fantasy as a genre, and I'm going to introduce our speaker, our interviewee, in just a minute. But we got to do a couple of housekeeping things real quick. I want to say welcome everyone to the live stream. The housekeeping items are, you guys, in the drop down box below, if this worked right, there should be a link to the Bingo Baker card where you can generate your own Bingo Baker card to play bingo with Sandy Says Read. So tonight, as Stephen and I are talking, you'll be able to check off some of the phrases that we say frequently here on the channel. There are no prizes. No prizes. You don't win the game. You just get the dopamine hit each time that you get to check off one of the phrases that we use. Other housekeeping items, please subscribe to the channel while you're here because there are going to be more of these interviews coming up. I already have another one in process that's going to be really awesome and you guys are going to be excited about it. So even after this awesome one tonight, there's more coming. So yay. Yay and welcome, Mark Avery. Welcome to the chat. Welcome, Clayton. Good to see you, Clayton. I haven't talked to you in like 5,000 years. Hi. All right, so welcome you guys. Come on in. Please subscribe to the channel while you're here. Last housekeeping item is I do have a merch shop, which I didn't think to put in the drop-down box yet. If you're watching this on replay, I will put the link down there for you guys. But I do have a merch shop to like actually try to make some profit off of all this stuff. Now we're going to get into the good stuff, all right? I want to welcome our guest tonight. This is Stephen Zimmer. He is the publisher at Seventh Star Press. He is the founder of the Imaginarium Convention, which is going on its 11th year now. He is an editor of manuscripts. So those authors out there who need someone to help them fine tune or revamp and fix an entire manuscript, he is there for you. He is also an author in his own right. He has just a ton of books and short stories and novellas to his name. And I'm hoping, Stephen, that we can start by talking a little bit about that aspect of you before we dive into our main topic tonight. Now, I'm going to start looking at my screen now instead of talking to you folks out there on camera. I'm going to be looking at the screen an awful lot so that I can be looking at Stephen, and so I can be looking at the chat box so I can try to keep track of a few things. We'll see if Sandy can multitask. But Stephen, I wanted to mention to you, you and I met years ago under your author persona and my author persona when I wasn't interviewing people, but we were just authors. And I wanted to show you, I found in my garage my Context 20 program from way back, look, 2007.
Wow.
I think we met at this convention. I think this was when we met. It was either Context
It
or...
was DemiCon out in Des Moines, Iowa.
There you go.
I was on the road for my first book, The Exodus Gate, and you and I met in the dealer room, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Because I was like, another fantasy author, fantastic.
Yep. So, there you go.
Oh, yes, I remember it real well. Yeah, I got in action just after that period that you're talking about. You know, my first book came out in 2009, so that's when I started hitting the circuit and all that.
Okay. Yep. All right. Okay, so tell me, I've written down some questions for you about your author persona. I wanted to ask you about, I guess, what fantasy series or what work in progress do you have going on right now that is most closely related to fantasy? I mean, are you working on something in your Raiden Valkyrie series? What are you working on right now that you can talk to us about?
Right now, I actually am. I am finishing up a duology. First book is called Beyond the Gates, and it is currently in the editing pipeline. I've already sent it off for editing, and it's just waiting to get edited. The second one, I went ahead and I finished it, and right now I'm just doing a few tweaks and polishes on it. And then right after that, I'm going to finish up some polishes on a Ragnar Stormbringer novel called Where Mountains Rise. And then I also have one for Hong V. Shadowwalker, my newest character in that world. That's called As Above, So Below. And it's a provocative title, but when you read the book, it makes a whole lot of sense.
Nice. Very nice.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I've enjoyed the Raiden Valkyrie stories. I have a couple of them sitting. I will show the audience, and there's going to be a huge glare on it because guys, there's always a
yes.
glare. There we go. Get Heart of the Lion.
Well, if I get them in matte finish one day, if I get they won't glare as much.
Yeah,
well, those are the glossy.
This one is also glossy. This one has 3 tails in it.
Yes,
this one does.
3
Yeah,
from
that one.
collection.
Yeah. But tell me about the Dream of the Navigator. This one's in matte. It doesn't have quite the glare.
Yes,
the Dream of the Navigator doesn't
quite the glare. Yeah.
Don't you have the second book in this series already out, don't you?
No, that one is also is about to be finished. I hear the editing on that's about to be finished, so that will be released this year. It's going to be called Rise of the Voyagers, and that is the second book.
Okay.
And it's an easy one to actually describe because I think this fits it perfectly. I call it Brave New World in 1984 meets Narnia. It's got a little bit wide dystopian, but also a strong kind of contemporary fantastical element that comes into it. And it's like I always love to use the word, a genre blender. So of sorts, but yes, it's got a lot of fantasy elements, but also woven with science fiction and near future tech and dystopian kind of undertones. But it's got a positive message long term, but I don't want to give it away too much.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you that stories nowadays, any fantasy stories that have like a positive or a hopeful message in them, I'm finding that few and far between, but I'm finding that to be just a good, like a palate cleanser. I'm finding that to be just a very positive, a very good thing to put into my reading schedule. Things that have hope in them. I'm liking to throw that into the reading schedule. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
tell us what is it about the fantasy genre that appeals most to you? Tell the audience what it is about fantasy that attracts you to the genre.
As a reader, I think it's just the ability just to go anywhere. It's just almost without limits. Because you can have elements of magic, you can have the supernatural, you can have fantastical worlds, creatures, and there are other genres of speculative fiction certainly that can do that. But definitely with horror, you can do that and things like that. But obviously, that's going to take a much darker tone. With fantasy, you can pretty much run the gamut. It's like a full spectrum of possibilities, and so I love that as a reader. Now, as a writer, flipping the coin a little bit, I love the fact that it gives you the ability to kind of take readers into a place and get them to believe in something that they can't experience or haven't experienced in their own lives, and really get at that suspension of disbelief. And I think that's a lot of fun. And then also the ability to go into representing themes and things like that without it really getting heavy-handed. Like some books can get really preachy on certain topics, but in fantasy you can kind of weave some things in to kind of work with some themes, and they don't have to come across as overly bashing over the head while you're looking at some serious topics or things that people might not would turn on to otherwise. So I love that about the fantasy in terms of writing it. So yeah, for as both reader and a writer, that's why I love the genre and have since my mom read me Lord of the Rings at the age of 7. So that got the ball rolling.
That is awesome. I love that. Okay. So the importance of fantasy and the genre fiction of fantasy literature, the importance of that presentation that you gave, I want to dive into that thought a little bit, because you had given a presentation on the importance of fantasy as a genre that we should be reading, we should be giving more gravitas to, I guess, as readers. And you had called and we talked about that a little bit, but I want you to tell the audience about first of all, I don't remember which conference it was that you were preparing that presentation for. So could you tell our audience which conference you were getting that presentation ready for? And do you remember what you titled the presentation?
That I may not know exactly,
Okay.
but it was the Conference of Writers for the Bluegrass Writers Coalition.
Okay.
Annual conference that takes place in Frankfort, Kentucky. Highly recommend it.
Mhm.
It's a one-day event and run by Virginia Smith and her
Yeah.
group up there,
Mhm.
and it's just an excellent event. And they'd asked me it's an all genre writers event, so there's a lot of people who write literary fiction, Kentucky poet laureates at it. Just, I mean, amazing writers. And I'm admittedly one of the few speculative fiction writers that's there. There's not a whole lot of us that are there, and so I thought it'd be fun to kind of talk to the crowd that normally wouldn't be into either reading or writing fantasy and other speculative fiction. And I thought it'd be fun to talk about why it's a viable genre, why it's worth reading, why it's worth getting some hints and tips and stuff from to make your writing better, even if you write thrillers and mystery, and why fantasy should be part of your reading. And so that's
Okay.
kind of the angle that I went into it as.
Okay. Got
I
it.
did that.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to ask, if you remembered how the topic came about, like where the
Mhm.
idea germinated, where it became. Okay. So tell us how that audience reacted, or how they received the topic and the presentation. How did that audience react to it?
I thought I would get more pushback, just trying to make a guess as to how it would go,
Right.
just because I have been in situations before where some literary fiction authors kind of go, "Oh, you're one of those people," that write speculative fiction, and sometimes you
Mhm.
get that, from at times in the literary world, and so I thought I would get a little bit more pushback. But the funny thing was, it was actually really well received, and people really enjoyed it, and they even came up and said, "Hey, I don't read or write, in these genres, but I found this really interesting, the points that you're making and bringing up, and it was." It went over really well, and evidently Virginia got really good feedback on it afterwards.
Good. Good.
So it's something that I could definitely do at other conventions and stuff. But
Mhm.
it's a topic I think needs to be out there more. I think Michael Williams, original Dragonlance author, who's a attendee at our convention every year, he's another one that really advocates it as a viable literary area like fantasy
Mhm.
fiction.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, definitely a little bit of a tip of the cap to him because, he and I have had conversations about it before too. But
Mhm.
definitely something that needs to be part of the literary world on
Mhm.
the same level as anything else.
Right.
It
I
shouldn't
hear
be
you.
seen as a lower level, when it gets to
Right.
discussions of literature.
Right. 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 Well, you and I mean, we've been writing this stuff for a while. We've been interested in it for a while. You and I both have. And I have to say that, when I first finished my first fantasy novel, I didn't realize the pushback I would receive, going out to then look for an agent. Okay, that was before 2007. That was well before 2007 when I had that first manuscript done. I'm going to look for an agent now, right?
Mhm.
And trying to find an agent who would accept fantasy was hard. I mean, trying to find, I was like pulling teeth. I mean, looking for someone like that who would accept fantasy. It was difficult to find. Of course, that was back in the days when I went to like Barnes and Noble and found the book of literary agents that are out
Oh,
there in the
the
world,
the
and you had to
writer's
look
market.
there.
Yeah, the writer's
Yes,
market. Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Right, right. But it was surprising to me to discover that fantasy wasn't like, folks weren't looking for fantasy. They weren't beating down the door to find fantasy writers. And it surprised me. I was, I guess, disillusioned. I don't know. It was it was a surprise because I had grown up with like Dark Crystal and
Mhm.
Labyrinth and Legend, those movies, and seeing them get such good reception, right? So when all of a sudden the fantasy genre as literature was not wanted, it just surprised me. I found that a little disheartening.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
would surprise me because you look at pop culture. I mean, like, look at today. I mean, giant
mhm,
series is like Game of Thrones, and franchises like
right.
Lord of the Rings. I don't talk about that Amazon series. That's a no no with me. but
Agreed.
I speak of the Peter Jackson movies. Yes, those were fantastic. But I mean, you have so many that are so many franchises that are so iconic and huge in
Mhm,
pop culture. And so, yeah, you'd think there'd be a little bit more of an opening in what you're discussing. But I saw that too when I was getting into things in the around the time I came out in 2009 and 2010 with my first novels. So I
mhm,
saw the same kind
mhm,
of thing that you did, and that's part of what influenced me to go the small press route. And not necessarily seek an agent actively in the beginning because I just thought I'd be in an endless limbo, and I
mhm,
wanted to be out there and creating and writing, and and I felt like I would really stagnate if I didn't have at least a few things out there.
mhm.
So
I hear
so
you.
so that
Mhm,
influenced me. Same dynamic you're talking about influenced me to go in the small press direction.
mhm. Well, and that's well, you know my story. That's what I eventually
Mm.
did. I
Yeah,
querying what few authors or what few agents were interested in fantasy just became disheartening.
yeah,
And I know myself, that kind of rejection, I'm not going to be able to stand it for too awful long. And so I stopped that, reworked my stuff, and just went straight to a small press. Like you're saying, I went straight to
right.
the small press
Hmm.
that was interested in fantasy. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, so we're talking a little bit about publishing. We're getting into the publishing sphere. So let me jump to another question here about how some of these different social platforms out there are affecting sort of the publishing side of fantasy. I mean, you as Seventh Star Press's publisher and editor
Hmm.
and person in charge. I mean, how are you seeing some of the different social media platforms affecting or influencing what you will take on as a project in like a fantasy realm or any of the speculative fiction realms?
Well, I see it in the major press level. It really does affect it on the social media platforms because they do look for you having a large platform as being one factor in deciding whether or not they bring you aboard. And so it's almost like in some instances, an author has to be successful
Mhm.
before they get the
Right.
contract with one of those companies or
Mhm.
publishers. And I've seen it many times when we've had guests at Imaginarium that have gone that path. They've sold hundreds of thousands of books, and then they get the 3 book deal with a major press publisher,
Mhm.
things of that nature. And by that time, obviously, they have a large platform to offer, so it does factor in a little bit on that level. But then they also, there's various certain trends that'll be kind of red hot at a certain time. They'll be looking for maybe books that are set in like Eastern type fantasy or something like that, something
Mhm.
influenced by that, or it's like a constantly shifting landscape. And but with the small press level, I mean, there's always always some very solid folks out there that are working to get things out, and things that are not things are different, new voices and things. I think they take more chances. They're not necessarily looking at something that has to necessarily become like a Netflix series to take a chance on it. And so I think a lot more new voices can break out and like small on the small independent press level, where I think less chances are taken on the larger level.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Definitely. Yeah.
they're looking for somebody that has some clout before they even bring them aboard
Yeah.
in a lot of
That's
cases.
I see the I see the marketing side of that. I
Hmm.
see I see where they're coming from on the marketing and the promotion and the money side of it. I mean, I see it, but it breaks my heart, right? I mean, as an author, as a creative, it breaks my heart to see that monetary side of it factor into what should be a creative endeavor, right? That's a
Oh,
shame.
definitely,
So
definitely.
so I'm so thankful that there are independent presses like Seven Star Press. There
Mhm.
used to be Archibooks Publishing, right? I'm so glad there are these smaller presses out there in the world who can take a look at, okay, what is the creative endeavor in
Mhm.
this? Not just, okay, how big is
Mhm.
your platform? How many people
Right,
on Book Talk are talking about this
right.
project?
How many followers on X app and all that stuff.
Right,
But
right.
and there's so many great ones. I mean, like William Joseph Roberts with Three Ravens Publishing, and then of course Gene and Kyle with Jumpmaster Press, Tony Acree with Hydra Publications, and of course Marion Allen and Teely Harris and Sarah Marion with Per Bostet Publications. There's so many that I know directly, and I could tell you from my conversations with them and having known them and seen how they do things. Yes, they are looking at the quality of it, and they're looking for the original voice, and they want it to be a good good work, and it's not they're not in the look. Of course it's great if somebody does work with them that has a platform. I'm not saying that's marketing wise that's a great thing,
Right.
but but ultimately, yeah, they're looking to put out good quality work, and that's great, and it's not all about the bottom line as it tends to be with some of the others
Right.
on the big level.
Well, I need to welcome Jeff Lamar, who's just come into the chat over here. Stephen, I'm so new to this that I don't know if you can see a chat window on your screen. I think I'm the only one who can.
I see a window, but I don't see who's in there. I can't
Okay.
on my end see who's in there.
Okay. All right.
Certainly, yeah. I'll definitely give a shout out to Clayton and Mark and Jeff as well.
Yeah.
Great, all of them great,
Mhm.
and I should say all three of them are great writers. So
Yeah.
better be
Well,
on my
and
A game. I got some good people in the audience here.
well, they'll call us out if we screw this up,
Yes.
I'm sure. Well, I'll take all the blame. I'm the one running the equipment on this end.
Yeah.
So if anything goes wrong, it is my fault. So Jeff is asking us a question, though. He would like to know, what's your advice for getting your fantasy work noticed amid the sea of new releases?
That is the $1 million question.
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, and and that's something that there's a lot of people do some interesting things out there, and like I was noticing that Dan Klefstad's just getting welcomed into that recently. He was released his new book, DIY Book Promo, which is a marketing book, a really excellent one, which I'm going to be doing a review on. But he had as soon as he started getting some movement with that book, he started getting hit with a deluge of people offering to basically launch a bunch of chat bots to do reviews for him on Amazon and stuff like that.
Nice.
Certain paid services, of course. But yeah, there's a lot of that stuff that goes on, a lot of what I call shenanigans. And so, I think that it's a lot of sweat equity. I think the main thing for getting noticed, I think I do think that you do have to get at least a bit of a voice on a few platforms. You don't have to spread too thin, but do concentrate on a couple to build up, and so that you do have a bit of a presence on some pretty larger social media. That's one thing. Second thing is getting the reviews up, and I mean by that legitimate reviews, really courting book bloggers, courting people that are actual live reviewers, and getting them to take a look at your work so that you can get a number of reviews going, and then also if you can get some blurbs from some other authors, and then you could take phrases from those reviews and those blurbs and really use them in all of your graphics and all of your marketing, and that does really put a little bit of a different sheen on it. I also think that it's important to also look into the visual side of things, whether that's getting maybe a short film made out of your work, something like that can kind of go into one of the other media. If you're doing fantasy and things like that, you might even get like a game company or a small independent game company to do some kind of gaming module based on your world. That's something I'm actually exploring right now and actively working on for the Raiden world. But kind of looking to get your stuff into some other media spheres if you're really wanting to make some noise, because if you can get something picked up that goes into film festivals, or maybe gets picked up for something episodic, that easily can escalate your awareness out there if it's in other forms of media. And it's just that's the kind of world we live in. Unfortunately, it's not how it was 20, 30 years ago. And but those are some things that I think that will get noticed. And then also, like if you're doing, and I think it's very important to be active with live events and it's something that I need to be doing more of myself. I just have so much going on. It's been so tough to get away, but it is very important to be out on circuits of sorts, doing bookstore signings, conventions, things like that, and meeting and networking with people face to face. I think that is, it's great that we have venues like this where we can have online activity, but nothing beats when you meet somebody in person. And so I think that in-person networking opportunities at conventions, conferences is also a piece of the puzzle. So I think if you take all the things that I just illustrated, I think yeah, you can make some more noise and hopefully get some traction. But you're gonna be investing a little bit too, and you will have to sink in a little bit of money here and there just to make sure you have good looking swag or good looking merch, and make sure you're presenting it in a way like well, not in a way, it is a brand, and always making sure you're representing it professionally. Make sure your cover art what professionally looks pro. Everything you're presenting looks like a pro operation. And I think that's another piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I agree. I want to say hi to Dwan. I want to call out a hello to Dwan, who's just.
I had a TV suddenly come on in here.
Oh gosh!
Hold on.
Something just happened where you are. Lightning or something just happened.
Yes, I don't know. Turn this off here. This TV just came on here.
That's all right. Well, then I'm going to type in the chat and say hello.
Okay. Let me get this. There we go. I unplugged it.
That'll solve it right there. There you go.
There's a TV monitor that just came on. How's that for exciting and strange at the same time?
I'm waiting for a catio. I expect like Vicky or Albert to appear in the background while we're talking. I want to see Albert.
I should write a book about that myself. We've got a new cat that we're trying to introduce, and not getting along perfectly with the other two, and so we have to have space between both camps right now. And so two are right now in one room, and the other one's out there right now outside of this room. And so there's not likely to be a catio at the moment. Once there's full harmony back in the house, then with among the cat population here, then yes, that'll return.
Yeah, very good. Okay, all right. I've completely lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, you were mentioning some of the marketing. The marketing. Like I was going to say I don't have anything that's going into like video production at this time. I do want to do some audio versions of some of my works, and I've got a smaller one, and that. Della and the Dragon Sword that was published in that anthology last summer.
Enchanted Realms?
Enchanted Realms came out at the end of July last year. Yeah, and there was a whole bunch of us who had novellas in that. And that was another way that, a fantasy author can kind of get some more marketing for stuff, is if you've got a world that you've built, okay, you've got a whole world there. There are probably extra people in that world beside your main characters. And you can take those extra people and write some stories about them, write some backstories, write some extra stuff. And that extra stuff can get published elsewhere. And if you're publishing it elsewhere, that's extra marketing that you can point to your main series. And it's just an extra way to do something with your fantasy stuff, and to get some extra marketing and make yourself stand out a little bit. But what I want to do is take that Della and the Dragon Sword and make an audiobook of it, because I think I could do an audiobook of that length and make that be my practice, right? Let that be my practice book and see how it goes. So that's one of the things I want to do. But I'm also doing a candle line, a line of scents from my fantasy world. And the artwork has just come in for that this week. I've seen the final artwork on several of the scents, and it's looking really good. It's looking fantastic. I've got a perfume for my main character. I've got a cologne for my dragon. There's just cool stuff happening in that sense. But if you think about it, a new candle line isn't necessarily going to go viral on Twitter, right? That's not how that's going to help with marketing. It's not going to help in that direction. That's going to help more with like physical sales somewhere. So there's just different ways to look at it to stand apart from other fantasy authors, because I don't know too many other fantasy authors who have the scent of the estate where their action takes place out there for people to purchase, but I'm going to have
No.
it, right? Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
the kind of
you're
thing that's coming
you're
up.
doing that. I know Demetrius Witherspoon is a master at this. He does the Submerged Universe, and oh my God, he's got merchant action figures and collectible card games, and yeah, he had perfume line, apparel line. I mean, he's completely independent, and it's just amazing what Demetrius does. And yeah, love it when I catch up with him on our Star Chamber show, because he's always got new stuff going on there. And yeah, was by himself. Yeah, and yeah, people notice when they go to conventions. Yeah, he stands out, and just like you do, with different kinds of offerings. But again, if you heard yourself talking, that's exactly what I'm saying. Presenting yourself in a very pro way. You're investing some money into developing some of those things. Yeah, you do have to put a little bit into it to make these things happen. Not necessarily you don't have to mortgage the house to do it, but yeah, you do have, you do have to put a little money into your what you do.
Right. What's the phrase? Never gamble more than you can lose.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Definitely in the crypto market. Yeah.
Right. Clayton is asking in the chat how many words in that potential short audiobook. I'm not sure. I have Della has a short story that was published in an anthology a few years back, and then the novella is around 27,000 words. So I think if I put those together, I've got around 30,000 words or so. So it's about 30,000 words. So it's short, a novella, basically. Okay, so
Clayton, that machine civilization, those machine civilization stories, his stuff is very, very good. Highly recommend it.
So I wanted to ask, I mean, book talk is kind of the elephant in the room when it comes to marketing books, but
yes.
I see that as kind of a double-edged sword, because right now book talk is getting kind of a bad rap in book circles, because they've some book talkers have promoted books that are less than fabulous quality. Let's put it that way. So how are you as a publisher, how are you thinking that we can still leverage book talk? How can we still work with that, considering the fantasy genre already has a touch of stigma about it? How do we work around that? I mean, if we have book talkers who are talking up books that have problematic characters and problematic scenes of naughty stuff, how are we going to use them or encourage promotion through them for a genre that we want to be taken seriously? That's what I want to ask.
That's a tough question, because I mean, book talk, I mean, yeah, I know a lot of people have, opinions pro and con about it, but the fact remains that there's an enormous audience there that you can't reach on other platforms. I mean, it definitely reaches the Gen Z, the Gen Zs and younger millennials better than any other platform out there, period, right now. And that changes, I mean, I've watched many a platform rise and fall and move here and there over the time, but yeah, it is a big force at the moment. And so yeah, you can't ignore it entirely from a publishing or promotional perspective. But I think that when you get into it, I mean, again, you just have to make sure you're representing yourself authentically when you're on doing video, or if you're doing little videos for like a TikTok channel or something like that. Just present it authentically and kind of let the chips fall where they may. But yeah, because I mean, some of these, influencers, yeah, I mean, they do take on some stuff, and it just, yeah, you wonder, what's going on behind the scenes how they got attention for certain things that they're pushing. And, but again, that's I don't have an answer for, why they make the choices they make sometimes. But, and then the other thing is to avoid the temptation of trend chasing. Because I think a lot of us can, you watch what's kind of happening out there and what's, gets hot for the moment, or what these, some of these big channels are pushing. And you think, oh man, maybe I should, get a little. Some writers can get a little. I've never had that problem myself. I've always, stuck to the stories I've wanted to tell. But I do see a lot of writers that do get tempted to want to follow the trend, and that can get pretty dangerous and get them to alter, who they are as writers and storytellers, and before they know it, they're not turning out their best work, and when they stray away from what they originally set out to do. And so I think there's some dangers in that. But yeah, I mean, it is a massive platform, and it does reach an audience that's only there and for the moment. And so yeah, I say it's a tool to be made use of if you're into this. So yeah, I don't say shy away or not court it. If you're able to and you're comfortable with video. Definitely try to get your stuff featured there. And yeah, because there's no question that it has an impact. And I mean, I walked into some bookstores regionally around here, and they actually have tables where they have book talk favorites
Right.
in the bookstores. So that tells you how much influence it has. I mean, without question. Yeah.
Yeah, I have some feelings about some of the stuff that Book Talk has recommended. I won't go there. We're talking about fantasy.
I'm with you.
Fantasy.
I
Fantasy is an important genre.
Yes,
right.
there's every day I get through my days with humor. Otherwise, I'd had to have higher blood pressure.
Yeah.
Seeing some of this stuff.
I feel it. Yes, I feel it. Inner peace.
Yes.
Inner peace. Yeah.
And a good sense of humor. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I think I want to ask about some of the subgenres that have been coming up in fantasy as of late, and how some of those might be influencing, either good or bad, the perception of fantasy as an important genre, as an important form of literature. For instance, like romantasy, grimdark. Although I happen to love grimdark, but I mean the elements of romantasy and cozy fantasies, how are those works influencing the perception of fantasy as an important genre or as a serious genre out there among readers? How, as a publisher, how are you seeing that?
I think those kind of things are merely broadening the readership of fantasy in general. I think what it happens is it starts to break down the barriers of people that only read romance or only read horror and things like that. And it starts to give them their conduit into the fantasy genres. It's the way that they can ease into it, where there is stuff in those subgenres that's comfortable to them, that they know that they like, and it gives them a kind of the area to connect with the genre more. And some of them very well could start embracing other types of subgenres and epic fantasy, things like that, once they discover it. And in many cases, a lot of these readers just simply haven't discovered it yet, and they don't know they like it. I've heard that from readers before, where I've had somebody say, well, I never really read a lot of fantasy, but I just thought I'd give your book a try, and I really liked it, and I think I'm going to read more fantasy. That happens. And so some of these subgenres, I think, do that function like that. They bring people in. They give them a way in to the full genre.
Nice. I like that. That's a very good, positive, and optimistic view of it. I mean, I spend too much time on Twitter. It is one of those platforms where I do have a pretty good following on Twitter. I am able to do some marketing through there, and I see some results through there. So I spend too much time there. But I've seen the gatekeepers show up on Twitter, right? The gatekeepers especially in like the Tolkien fandom. Oh my goodness. The gatekeepers show up, and if you don't like the fantasy the way they like the fantasy, well, then you're wrong, right? And that gatekeeping is what was in my mind when I was thinking, well, okay, so if we have the romantasy folks coming in and loving romantasy and talking about romantasy and cozy fantasies, well, the gatekeepers pop up and say, well, that's not real fantasy. You shouldn't be reading that. Well, you can read whatever you want to read, and welcome, right? You come on in. It's
my
the
attitude.
gatekeepers that make me fussy.
Yep. Yeah, I know what you mean.
All right. Well, welcome, Chrissy, to the chat. It's good to see Chrissy joining us this evening. You guys, if you're not already a subscriber, I want to welcome you to subscribe to my channel because I'm going for a goal this year. All right, Stephen, I know that you have a live stream of your own to do later this evening. You are the host, a co-host of Blog Talk Radio's Star Chamber, and you have a fabulous guest this evening. So I think we probably have a hard stop coming up here pretty soon. So I want to
got some
open.
more time. We have some more time. That's
Good.
fine.
Okay. Good. I want to open the floor to let you talk to the audience about just the importance of including fantasy literature. I want to say in our lives, but in our school curriculums. You know, in high school, I don't think I was required to read a fantasy novel. You know, like
But
we
we
read To Kill a
did.
Mockingbird.
But we
Did
did.
you?
The
Oh, good for
Iliad.
you.
Hold on. The Iliad, the Odyssey,
Oh.
Beowulf.
Oh, well, see, I didn't
Think
have to read
about those.
Beowulf in high school.
Yeah. Oh, really?
They
We
didn't
did. We
know.
did. Yeah.
Yep. Good
'Cause
for
I'm like,
you. Good.
because a lot of people don't think of those things as quote unquote fantasy, but they are most definitely, I think, at the roots of
Beowulf
fantasy
is
literature.
definitely.
Absolutely. And I'll stand on that hill. Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
So
you're
yes,
right. We
going
did
away. Yeah.
Bullfinch's mythology. I
So
remember
I mean,
we
yeah,
went through
it
that
starts
in high
getting
school.
into
Yeah,
it.
we sure did. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
So yeah, we may
All
not
right.
realize it, but some people have. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Oh,
So
and help Molly.
yes, but yeah, I agree. Some the fantasy novels, I mean, things that are written as fantasy novels should
Mhm.
be incorporated a certain number in the
Okay.
curriculums, especially classics. I mean, you know, at least work something like The Hobbit, something that I think could, you know, be a very, very easy thing to work in.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I definitely agree with The Hobbit.
Yeah,
Anyone who's
something.
watched this channel before knows that's the book that like got me into fantasy when I was a kid.
Mm,
My dad brought that book home one evening and he's like, "Oh, here, you want to read this?" And I don't remember how old I was. If I was like, I was still in grade school, right? And so I'm reading this thing going, "Oh, I love this." That would have been an awesome book to have read to you in grade school, like
mhm.
after recesses, right? Or just read as a book together in class. That would have been a good one. Definitely.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so tell me about like your I guess I want you to tell the audience, you know, Stephen's philosophy on, you know, fantasy's role in our lives, fantasy's role in helping us like just get through the day to day. How important is fantasy for us to have in our lives?
Well, I think it's definitely um, it lets you just embrace the imagination fully. I mean, because the challenge of a fantasy writer is the suspension of disbelief and getting people to believe in worlds that they haven't visited, to believe in creatures that they've never encountered, to believe in societies and different kinds of species or races of beings that they've never ever, you know, personally experienced or anybody else has on Earth. And so the fantasy writer, I think, actually in some ways, and other genres like fantasy, has a little bit of an extra burden than the mystery or thriller writer, because they have to reach that higher bar of suspension of disbelief and get people to believe in those things. And yeah, the imagination's at the root of it all. And so I think that is, you know, the more powerful your imagination grows, the more you think outside the box. I think it just starts kind of all working together in your mindset to help to roll with things in the storms of life, and to have hope and things like that when you know get a bigger picture kind of mentality, and you get that kind of imaginative mindset. I think it really does help you weather a lot of storms and get through things better, I think, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yep.
Hmm.
I agree. 100%. 100%.
Absolutely.
When it's a rough day, boy, it's nice to be able to just go into another world. Just
Hmm.
whether it's one I've created, whether it's one you've created, whether it's one that Tolkien created for us, just slide into another world for a little while. Just relax there. That's a good positive thing. Just let everything go away for a little bit. Yeah.
And with the books, and with a book, you, the reader, create that in your head. and
Right.
it's not provided for you like in a video game or a movie,
Mhm.
where all the visuals are provided and all the looks and all the tones. I mean, yes, the author and the reader come together to create this, but the reader is very much engaged more than I think any other kind of media in their imagination and their own perspective and their own way that they see these fantasy worlds. And that's why it was kind of profound for me when I went to see the movie versions of Lord of the Rings, because I the funny thing was is that what I saw in my head was very similar to what Peter Jackson put on the screen. So
Nice.
it can be kind of fun at times, when you see those kind of intersections. But but yeah, it's you. I mean, it's taking place in your head,
Mhm.
and the author's with you along the way. But yeah, those visuals and the way you're hearing things and smelling things and experiencing things. I mean, that's all within you, in a way that is not like like I said, it's provided for you in a lot of other types of media, but books, yeah, it's a very personal, very interior thing.
Mhm.
And I
Okay.
think that's, for me, that's what makes it extra special.
Right. Right. Well, and
Hmm.
I think that might lead into another question for you, which is, can you tell our audience how you see that fantasy, that world building, or that imagination helping a writer who perhaps isn't typically a fantasy writer?
Oh, absolutely. Because when you have to approach world building and creating a culture and a history for a land or a race of beings that don't exist in our world, I mean, you have to really look at it comprehensively. You have to really look at it organically. I mean, you may be inspired by things across history or other cultures in the creation of those things, but ultimately, I mean, you really have to really get at the root of it and work to make it live and breathe and so forth. And so I think that, yeah, with a fantasy writer, I think that comes across real well, especially with really good fantasy, where they do make those kind of realms come alive and other worlds come alive. And I think that kind of mindset is something that a writer of another genre, like a mystery or thriller genre, or historical fiction, for example, could really draw from. The really, taking time to really think about the setting, to really think about the culture, to really think about the history that under and stuff that may not even make it on the page, like may not be part of the
Right.
dialogue or openly on the page, but it is underneath, and it's informing the writer on everything they're doing. But it's that depth, and I think that's where I think a writer in another genre can benefit from, kind of getting a really good perspective on the kind of depth that a fantasy writer has to go to make something real. And then they can kind of walk back into something that might take place in our world. But if they have that kind of well-rounded kind of approach like that, then I think they can really make their story shine, with a real authenticity, with
Mhm.
informed by all those things, cultural, historical, all that make it live and breathe.
Mhm.
It just
Mhm.
gives you a real you're really conscious of a world. I think that's something that a fantasy writer, is a good one, is really strong at. It's really you're really conscious of all the things that go into a world.
Right.
The geography, the geography can have a lot of effect on a culture and a setting.
Right.
Uh, I mean, just I could go on and on, for an hour about this, but I mean, but yeah, it's a very comprehensive approach that you have to do to make these so-called fantasy realms, come
Mhm.
alive. Yeah.
Yep. Mhm. Yeah. Well, and I could see giving a fantasy scene setting exercise to a murder mystery writer, like is a prompt.
Mhm.
Okay, here, sit down and do this exercise just to exercise your brain, just to exercise your writing muscles for a while. I mean, I could see doing that. And I'm not talking down about murder mystery writers at all. I'm just saying that could be an extra exercise to just get that like outside of the box thinking, to get that extra in-depth thinking just happening before you get started on your writing day. I could see that. Yeah, definitely.
And it might inspire them to even pick something more obscure in our world, like maybe a region of the world that isn't often visited in stories and or cultures, and they might get them to and once they're in that kind of thinking to glean something that's a little off the beaten track a little bit, and not be afraid to go there, not be afraid to try it. And in terms of setting and place and things like that, and scenes, and could very well lead them to something pretty fresh in their storytelling. You know, when they go down that road.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Definitely.
I think they lots of benefit from.
Yeah, we've got some folks to call out in the chat box. I want to say hello to Kenzie. She has joined us, and hello to Nessa. She has joined us. And I don't know if this is Amy or Melissa, but someone from Healing Hands Entertainment has joined the chat. So that's hello, gals. Good to see you guys. And Nessa has a question for us. She has asked, have you ever turned down a story for being too much like a role-playing game? And I guess as a publisher, Stephen, have you experienced that? Have you had to turn down a story for being too close to a role-playing game?
Not specifically for that reason, but I have seen cases with other publishers where something like that has more or less happened, where it just reads a little bit like a paint by numbers kind of thing, like, and yeah, it just needs a little bit more, needs a little reworking. But yeah, me personally, no, I have not had to turn something down for that reason.
Okay.
No.
I'm going to get to Dwan's question in a second here, but I recently, just this year, I've read It's All Fun and Games by Dave Barrett. And I reviewed that here on the channel. And it's a middle grade fantasy story. And it is just step by step Dungeons and Dragons. And it is, I mean, it follows the Dungeons and Dragons playbook pattern, but it's supposed to. I mean, it's set up, it tells you that's what it's going to do. And it makes perfect sense. And it works. And it's, it works perfectly as that. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can.
Yeah. I don't remember what publisher it came from. So that's out of my brain now. I don't remember what publisher he's with. Okay, so Dwan is asking us. He says, "I'm not a fantasy reader." We can fix that, Dwan. We can fix that.
Yeah.
But what would be a good intro fantasy book for someone new? Well, Stephen has a whole bibliography. Yeah, I also have some. But what's a good one for? Gee whiz, The Hobbit, right? We were just talking about The Hobbit. Oh my goodness.
Well, that's a good gateway. Yeah. And
yeah,
I think
that's a good gateway drug.
Real gritty action. I think that you can't go wrong with anything by Robert E. Howard, especially with his Conan stories.
Right.
I mean, those are gripping, intense, and they live and breathe today just as much as they did back then when he wrote them. And so I think that's one. I think writers like David Gemmell, who I think is criminally underappreciated. I think he's definitely got a little bit of the Robert E. Howard gritty heroic fantasy side, but then he's got the kind of like C.S. Lewis like undertones of kind of like something bigger picture and spiritual kind of underneath the surface as well. He's got a real touch of that, and so he's a really interesting writer to read and really accessible, I think. But anything by David Gemmell I could recommend strongly, and of course if you're looking for something more allegorical or metaphorical, I think C.S. Lewis, Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe. And I know it's a bit of a classic, but that's a fun one to kind of get into too. But yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I'm just thinking of some of the bigger names, but the ones. But I think those would be some good ones for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm just thinking of there are so many authors that come to Imaginarium who write in the fantasy genre. So when Dwan is there in July,
Stephen Shrewsbury.
Yeah, Stephen has one that is a finalist in the Imaginarium.
You want a Robert E. Howard style writer? He's right up that alley. In fact, he just wrote a story that's made it into just Weird Tales. Just got into it.
Oh yeah, that I was thinking of the there's a compendium of Robert E. Howard stories that's been released, and he's got that Bran MacMorn story that's in there. I downloaded that one, and I downloaded the Silas. I think it was the other one I downloaded. the one that Jonathan Mayberry wrote. I downloaded those
Yeah.
two. I just haven't.
Yeah.
I downloaded them when I got back from my asphalt trip, right? And
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to stop and read them yet. So they're on the computer. They're there. I just haven't read them yet.
I'm about to start editing Stephen's new Rogan novel. So yes, this could be, if some folks are familiar with that, I'm getting ready to dive into his latest, and I know it's going to be awesome.
So, very good.
Oh yes.
All right. Okay. All right. So what? Oh my gosh, I'm missing. Oh, you guys, I'm so sorry. I'm missing questions over here in the chat. Hang on. I told you guys this would be a little bit random. This is the first live interview chat. So yeah. Yeah. Kenzie is saying she loved Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Yes, it is a very good one. Yeah, Lord of the Rings, the whole Lord of the Rings trilogy, when I was younger, when I first tried to read that, it was difficult for me to get into too. It was when I was an adult.
Very different from The Hobbit. Very different in the writing.
Very different from The Hobbit. Definitely. Okay, I think I caught what I needed to. If there's any questions that I missed, you guys are most welcome to repeat them in the chat box. That's totally welcome to do that. We've gone through all the questions that I had for you, Stephen, on here. I knew I had to keep it somewhat short so that I didn't bump into the time you need to prepare for the radio program this evening.
You're still okay. You're still all right.
So
I got till about 20 after 8 or so. So yeah, we can go.
Okay, so we got about 20 minutes to go. All right. Well then, if there's anyone in the, I know, I know. Well, but Kenzie, I don't want to. I don't like to use an author's name when I know their pseudonym, because I'm so afraid I'm going to out an author out there in the world, and so I don't know. I get weird about using an author's real name in public, on the internet, on the interwebs. I try so hard to. There you go. It is what it is.
It's real confusing when you run a convention and you work with somebody that has not only their legal name, but then they have like 2 or 3 pen names, and then they use those for all the different letters and notes that they write. So you're sometimes you have to figure out who it is.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, out on Twitter again. Out on Twitter, sometimes someone will pop up with the question, is it good to use a pen name? Should I use a pen name for this? I'm like, let me tell you some horror stories. Because the very first time I used a pen name to write a novel, that novel won an award. And it was the first award that I had won as an author. And so all of my marketing suddenly with this award was under someone else's name. And I couldn't say that Sandy Lender had won this thing. Kelsey Day had won this thing. I'm like, oh man, this is difficult marketing. So yeah, choose wisely when you're going to.
Yeah, it depends. Like if some of your books are children's books and then your other works are erotica, it's probably a good idea to use a pen name. Yeah. Then you got to.
Yeah, then you gotta.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so if anyone in the chat has a question for Stephen about fantasy or publishing or whatnot, let us know now. Now is your chance, because I'm going to just kind of open the floor up for that. And Stephen, if you could tell our audience some ways that they can find you online, how can they find your works online? Or if they're looking for an editor, how do they contact you? Give us some information on how we can get in touch with you.
Well, the easiest place to start is probably StephenZimmer.com, and my name's spelled with a PH, Zimmer. And there I do have a page or a menu option on there that talks about my editing work. And so if you'd like to have me work as a freelance editor, that's there. And also has, of course, information on my books and whatnot. But yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X app, and even have a TikTok channel. I don't post a whole lot on there yet, but I do have one. And yeah, I'm usually under either Stephen Zimmer 7 or SG Zimmer are usually my handles. So if you're on virtually any platform, if you look under one of those two, you probably will find me.
Okay.
Yeah, usually Stephen Zimmer 7, number 7, or SG Zimmer. One of those two usually pull me up on the various social medias. I love LinkedIn too. So if you're on LinkedIn, connect with
yeah.
me there.
Okay.
It's
Right.
a nice platform.
Well, when we're all done with this, when everything is finished and YouTube does what it does with the live stream, I'll put your links in the drop down box below this so that folks
Okay.
can find you easily. Just click and link to you from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, enter theimaginarium.com, which I hope everybody comes to this summer.
I can highly recommend it. Yes.
One heck of an event, and
Mm-hmm.
talk to a major possible new guest today for fingers crossed. So
Excellent.
Yes.
Very good. Okay. Well, Nessa did ask us another question here. Hang on. It's the chat moved. Hang on. She says, do you have any book recommendations that have fantasy elements but cross genres? Like genre blending. Do we have any fantasy elements that cross genre, like Dragon Riders of Pern?
Because I always think the one that comes to my mind is, but it's not totally fantasy, but it's got fantastical elements. Is the Meg series from Stephen Alton, which I just love that series because it blends like thriller elements, horror elements, fantasy elements, cryptozoology. I mean, it is a genre blender, and in the movies are fun, but they do not do justice to the books. The books are definitely very different from the movies, and they are. I mean, I'm telling you, they'll take you on an absolute thrill ride, and just the amount of oceanography and marine biology research is behind it. I know he did his homework, and but I love that series as a genre blender, and it does have fantastical elements woven into the
Cool.
plot line.
Cool.
Very
I know
clever.
that now I have not read Terry Brooks's I think it's Sisters of the Sea.
I have not read read.
I haven't read it yet, but if I understand it correctly, it has different elements going on in there. I mean, it's a fantasy story, obviously. It's mermaids, and there's magical stuff going on in there, but there's cross genre stuff going on in there, but I haven't read it yet, so I don't know all the stuff that's going on in there. But Terry Brooks is one to look into for cross genre stuff. His more recent stuff has some cross genre stuff going on.
You know who wrote a masterpiece of cross genres? Clive Barker, who everybody's going to think automatically of horror. When you first bring up his name, Books of Blood, things like that. But the novel Imagica, it's a big read. It's a big book, but it is a tour de force of cross genre fantasy, dark fantasy. It's got horror touches, but it's nothing like Books of Blood or like Hellraiser or things like that. It's an amazing cross genre. I think it's a masterpiece. But yeah, people want to look for something a little different they may not have heard of or tried of yet. That's one I always like to recommend for the quality of storytelling and writing. Just superb.
Okay. Molly is asking if Raiden is on Netflix. That pilot that you did.
No, the
where
pilot
can we find
is
it?
that's on YouTube, and you can Saga of a Lionheart, and that is on there to watch for free right now. So if you want to check it out, about an hour long. But I do hope we can take that somewhere and expand and develop that project in the near future.
Yeah. All right. I could probably tell the audience what that is. Because Stephen, I showed you guys the Raiden Valkyrie stuff earlier. But Stephen did a pilot episode, like a proof of concept, full length episode of the Raiden Valkyrie one of the Raiden Valkyrie stories. Tell us a little bit about, because I do not remember the actors and actresses who were in it. I don't remember.
The novel has not yet been released. That has the storyline that's actually in the pilot. So it's not anything that I've got out now book wise. So they will, if they do follow my books, they will get a fresh story there. But Brock O'Hearn, who appears in some of the Tyler Perry Medea movies, and he plays the big, huge, muscular, like, frat guy that's in the Boo movies, the Halloween ones.
Okay.
And he's a huge Instagram influencer, but he played my Ragnar Stormbringer, and then playing Raiden was Sol Geirstottir, who is from Norway, and she played Raiden, and we had a fabulous cast put together for this, because it was done completely grassroots. We had there's a big story behind everything with that project, because we actually had a big chunk of financing fall through just a few weeks before we actually were set to shoot. And so we were putting pressure cookers to hold everything together. And long story, but yes, we made it happen. And yes, put me behind the 8 ball for a few years, some debt wise, but but we made it happen. And yeah, it was a tough project to put on, but we definitely I think put together a nice little indie pilot, and I think it's got a lot of good moments in it and good scenes, and then definitely I'd hope some folks check it out. And they will get a taste of a little bit of my worlds and that. And if they do like it, yeah, there's plenty of books, because I've got 6 of Raiden's tales out individually, and I've got 1 trilogy that begins with Heart of a Lion, and I've got this new duology. It's done and not out yet. So there's a lot of stories there. And then I've got 6 out from Ragnar currently, and then this new novel on the way. So there is a lot out there if you like these characters.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I remember Holly's son played the monster. Wasn't he the big glowing monster in the pilot? I remember that.
Draugr. Yeah. And her other son was actually killed by him. I won't get into details, it's a bit of a spoiler, but one scene, yes, one brother kills the other brother, yes, in the same scene. And then if you get really eagle-eyed, you'll see Holly actually gets a cameo in too. But yeah, she's running away in the woods in one scene. It's kind of funny.
Yep. Yes. Fun. Yeah. That was I was impressed the way that thing, because I didn't know all the backstory of like the funding not coming through there at the end. I didn't know that, but I knew that it was, I knew that it took more funding.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, held the ship together, but yeah, it caused great pain for me for a few years afterwards. But yeah, and it's I'm really proud of it, and definitely I hope we can. Unfortunately, right after we got it and we're finally ready to present it out there, and then the big whole COVID mess hit, and everything shut down. Everything came to a grinding halt, and everybody stopped producing things, and it just hit at the worst possible time for pitching and presenting. And so yeah, we got thrown off track a little bit too. So yeah, it's just part of the road, though. He's got to keep going forward and roll with some of these things. But yeah, we will. I'm determined that one day, yeah, we'll find a way to get all that back on track.
You just pick it back up at one point. Yeah. Well, I believe these things happen for a reason, right? I'm not saying COVID happened for a reason. I'm saying that that particular project probably had an interruption for a reason. There's something better on the horizon for that project, and it's coming. We just got to wait for it to arrive. It's coming. Right. So yeah, and it'll be great. All right. Okay. Have we exhausted our topic of fantasy? Is there something else on your mind? This is your opportunity, Stephen. Tell us about what else is on your mind about the fantasy genre and how important it is for us. Tell us now.
Well, I think now, I mean, there's just so many great subgenres and flavors of it that yeah, there's something for you to connect with. And I think that's great that you brought up the grim dark and the romantasy. There's so many different gateways into fantasy now. Give it a try. Look around. You will find a story that you'll connect with, and they'll help you ease into it if you're not currently a fantasy reader. But once you get on once you understand it and find out what kind of, as I call it, magic it has, yeah, I think you'll make it part of your world for sure.
Wonderful. Okay. Yep. Dwan is asking tonight's Star Chamber. Yes, the Star Chamber blog talk radio show happens at 9 Eastern. So that's coming up really soon. So Stephen, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for being the first live interview. Thank you for being the guinea pig. Thank you. This is really, it is an important topic. It is close to my heart, obviously, since I I love fantasy. So thank you for being the first live interview here on Sandy Says Read. Thank you to
Anytime.
everyone who joined us in the chat. It was wonderful to have you guys popping in here and asking some questions. I'm so glad that you guys joined in. Please, get yourself a drink or a snack and then come back to your computers for the Blog Talk Radio show at 9 at the top of the hour. That link is going to be around. That link is going to be on Twitter. You will find it. Sandy doesn't know it off the top of her head.
Yes.
Yes. All right. But thank you so much, Stephen. I so appreciate you.
Oh,
And
thank you.
best wishes to you in all these projects.
Oh,
Great
thank you.
stuff. All right.
Great
Thank
to
you,
be here.
everyone. I'm gonna figure out how to end this stream. All right, here we go. Thank you, guys.